Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. And yesterday I put up a little training clip of me doing my pause seated presses, and I guess a lot of people weren't aware that is what I do for my overhead pressing right now. I occasionally do a standing press, I occasionally do behind the neck presses, but I do those pause presses off the bottom seated. And a lot of people are asking me why I do that. Another thing I want to point out for just a second, people who are trying to compare relative strength on something like that, and they try to say, well, another person on YouTube does more weight or whatever. Guys, you're comparing completely different lifts. I can do a hell of a lot more weight than 85 kilos on a front press. If I use a little bit of leg drive and I'm standing, I can do work sets with 100 kilos and I'm belted up standing. These are much more difficult lifts, and I think you'd be shocked. A lot of you guys will go take what you standing press and you go try to do what I do, start from the bottom position off the chest and drive from a dead stop. You're going to find that you may not even be able to get within 10 kilos of what you do on a standing press for the same number of reps. And I had someone else say, oh Jason, there's no way you do 100 kilos on that. You guys have watched me do 3x3 pause presses with 140 kilos on the close grip bench. So why anybody would think that I can't overhead press, standing press 70% of my pause work on close grip, somebody fails at math and knowing basic strength ratios in a human. But that aside, that brings up a very, very good point. When you're doing a lift like that, you're going to have to use a lighter weight. So why am I doing it? Well, first of all, you guys have seen the training situation my wife and I have here. We have a garage, but obviously there are height limitations. I can't do this. If I do this with my hand, I can touch the ceiling right there. And you start factoring in plates and everything else, my maximum height for a bar is right about here. There's no way I can do standing presses in there. People say, why don't you do it outside? Well, you are not familiar with the British weather. I have literally had, on my 3 training days that I have scheduled, I have literally gone 2 to 3 weeks straight already since moving in here to where it is raining when I go out to train. Or it has just rained and the ground is wet, and so me walking around, stepping out of the rack, which we do have a rack outside, and trying to handle heavy weights like that standing is a safety concern. So it gives me the inability to progress regularly on a standing press or a push press. So we get into, can the seated press, the way I'm doing it, be just as good? And I go, yeah, absolutely. Even though you're using less weight, basically that means less eccentric loading, because that's effectively what you get from the standing press, because everyone can use a little bit of leg drive. Everyone can use just a little body English. No matter how strict you think you're going, you can push up more weight due to cheating, and that's good if you're trying to develop full body strength. I don't necessarily need more. You guys forget that I rotate through high volume training sometimes, and up until recently, until I dropped back down to 3x3 for squats, I was doing 7 or 8 sets of squats every time I train without a belt. So my core volume's insane. I also deadlift every time I train. Now, I'm not necessarily doing maximum deadlifts, but it adds up. Even if you're working with 220 kilos, even if you're working with triples or sets of 5 with 70% or 80% of your max for a single set, that's a massive amount of loading on your core and your full body on a deadlift if you're doing it 3 days a week. So I end up doing squatting and deadlifting without a belt every single time I train. I'm good to go on loading my core and my full body right now. It's not really an issue. I don't necessarily need more lifts for that. And when I do rows, it's the same thing when I'm doing pin lay rows. So I don't necessarily need the lift to do that. I'm good there. I really need the lift to strengthen my upper chest, my whole shoulder girdle, and my triceps, and using it as a bench press accessory. So it's fine because it forces me to take all the cheating out and focus exclusively on the primary movers. And we could argue all day long as to whether the push press versus that strict seated dead stop press works the more all day long. But at the end of the day, it will still get the job done either way you go. It's just with this that I'm taking more of the full body out of it, and I'm exclusively working on possible weak points for me, because for me, I'm always weakest off the bottom of my bench press as a raw bencher. Me doing dead stop training, using those same primary movers, and I feel like my delts themselves are a weak link on my bench press, and they have been for a long time. My delts are underdeveloped compared to the rest of my upper body. So for me, that allows me to put some extra starting strength on those, and if I can get my delts to contract harder at the bottom of presses, it's going to improve my bench press, and my bench press has been coming up. So that's really the reasons I'm doing it. It's nothing special beyond that other than I'm trying to do primarily dead stop training. It allows me to do dead stop training and it works within the confines of my training environment and the situation I have. I'm not saying it's better or worse than the other. Different people and champions have gotten great success both for hypertrophy of their shoulders and triceps and everything, as well as improving their max bench press using everything from behind the neck presses to seated pause presses like I'm doing, from a dead stop to the push press to the strict press. In the end, as long as you feel like it's meeting your needs, it's developing all of those muscles and training you to be a stronger presser. You're going to get more hypertrophy, you're going to get more strength as long as you're able to progressively overload on it. At the end of the day, the differences are pretty minor in a well-balanced program. The differences become more critical if your program becomes more minimalist and you're not doing very much squatting or very much deadlifting, at which point it could become real critical as to whether you're standing or not for developing your full body power as an athlete. So hopefully that clarifies why I'm doing that. Alright guys, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it has been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time. But let me give you guys a bicep shot before I go. Oh.